Welcome to my channel. Emma Carter stood at the kitchen window, cradling a lukewarm cup of coffee. Outside, the quiet suburban street was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Across the road, Lisa Thompson was chatting with her son, Jake, who had grown into a striking young man since the last time Emma really noticed him. He was taller now, broader in the shoulders, his confident stance replacing the awkwardness of his teenage years. Emma's gaze flickered to her phone. 8:15 p.m. No message from Mark. She let out a breath, already knowing what it meant. Another late night at the office. Another excuse. The sound of her phone vibrating startled her. She picked it up, expecting Mark's usual impersonal text, but instead, it was Lisa. "Emma, I hate to ask, but could you do me a quick favor?" A few minutes later, Emma found herself standing at the front door, keys in hand. Jake was already waiting at the curb, running a hand through his dark hair as he spotted her. "Hey, Mrs. Carter," he said with an easy grin, his voice deeper than she remembered. Emma smiled, pushing down the strange flutter in her chest. "Just Emma. Mrs. Carter makes me feel ancient." Jake chuckled and slid into the passenger seat. The car filled with the scent of his cologne, something fresh and masculine, tinged with the faintest trace of leather. As she pulled onto the road, she stole a quick glance at him. He had the kind of effortless confidence that made people gravitate toward him. It was unsettling in a way she couldn't quite place. "So," she said, forcing herself to focus. "Car trouble?" "Yeah," Jake sighed. "Battery died on me. My buddy's got a charger, so I just need to grab it." A comfortable silence settled between them as the city lights flickered in the distance. Emma found herself easing into the moment, enjoying the rare company. Mark had been distant for months, maybe years, but sitting here, sharing space with someone who actually looked at her when she spoke, felt different. Jake shifted, stretching his legs. "Crazy how long it's been, huh?" Emma gave a small laugh. "Tell me about it. You were just a kid last time I saw you. And now..." His voice carried a note of something unreadable. She hesitated, searching for a response that didn't feel dangerous. "Now you're all grown up." Jake smirked. "Noticed, have you?" Emma's fingers tightened on the wheel. The air inside the car felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. She told herself she was imagining it. "Your trouble, Jake," she said, attempting lightness. "You have no idea," he murmured. The words sent a ripple through her, unexpected and unwelcome. She focused on the road, but her pulse betrayed her, drumming insistently in her ears. Minutes later, she pulled up outside a quiet residential street. Jake unbuckled his seatbelt but hesitated, glancing at her before stepping out. "Thanks for the ride," he said, his voice lower. "Anytime," she replied automatically. He paused. "You don't get out much, do you?" The question caught her off guard. What?" Jake tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You always this serious?" Emma forced a smile. "Someone's got to be the responsible adult." Jake leaned in just a fraction, his presence suddenly closer, heavier. "Maybe," he said, his voice slow and deliberate. "But responsible isn't always fun." Emma felt a warmth creep up her neck. It was an innocent exchange, wasn't it? But something about the way he looked at her made her stomach tighten. Before she could respond, he stepped out and shut the door behind him. Emma exhaled sharply. This was nothing. A harmless ride. A fleeting conversation. And yet, as she drove away, she found herself glancing at the rearview mirror, watching Jake disappear into the night, wondering, against all reason, why she suddenly felt like she was the one heading toward danger. Emma drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The quiet hum of the engine did little to drown out the thoughts swirling in her mind. She replayed the conversation with Jake, the way his voice had dipped, the way he had looked at her, like he saw something beneath the surface, something even she had forgotten was there. By the time she pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. No sign of Mark. Emma checked her phone. No texts, no missed calls. She sighed, shutting the door behind her. The house felt emptier than usual. Maybe it was the contrast, the warmth of the conversation with Jake versus the cold, habitual distance in her marriage. She kicked off her heels, poured herself a glass of wine, and sank into the couch. This was ridiculous. She was reading too much into nothing. A simple favor, an innocent exchange. So why did her skin still feel warm? A sharp vibration against the coffee table snapped her out of her thoughts. Her phone screen lit up. Jake, still thinking about our little drive? Emma's heart skipped. She stared at the message for a moment, then locked her phone without responding.
Don't be stupid, Emma.
She took a sip of wine, ignoring the way her hands trembled slightly. The next morning, Mark was already at the dining table when she woke up, his laptop open, fingers typing furiously. "Morning," she said, voice rough from sleep. "Hey," he replied without looking up. Emma walked to the kitchen, pouring coffee. No kiss, no eye contact, just like always. "You were late last night," she said, testing the waters. "Work ran over," Mark muttered. "Big client." Emma waited for more. Maybe an apology. A question about her night. But nothing came. She exhaled, gripping her coffee mug. "Mark, do you even?" Her phone vibrated on the counter. She glanced down.
Jake.
The breath caught in her throat. "Jake. I meant what I said. You don't get out much, do you?" She hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Then, as if sensing her hesitation, Mark finally spoke. "Can you take my suit to the dry cleaner today?" Emma blinked. "Seriously?" Mark glanced up, brow furrowed. "What?" She shook her head, forcing a smile. "Nothing." "Yeah, I'll take care of it." Of course, that's all she was to him now, someone to run errands. As Mark returned his attention to his screen, Emma picked up her phone and typed back before she could stop herself. "Emma, maybe I just haven't had a reason to go out." She hit send before she could overthink it. Jake's reply came within seconds. "Jake, what if I gave you one?" A dangerous invitation. The day passed in a blur, but Emma felt it, that thrill humming beneath her skin. A tension she hadn't felt in years. By the time evening rolled around, she was standing in front of the mirror, applying mascara. What was she doing? Jake had invited her out for a drink. Nothing serious, he'd said. Just catching up. As friends. And yet, she had spent 20 minutes picking out her dress. Her phone buzzed again. "Jake, I'll be at Haven Bar at 8. Come if you want." Emma's stomach twisted. This was a mistake. She shouldn't go. But when she glanced at the kitchen table, where Mark had left his empty coffee cup and unfolded newspaper, a reminder of everything dull and routine in her life, she picked up her keys. Just one drink. Just one conversation. She wasn't doing anything wrong, right? The moment she knew. The bar was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of whiskey and low conversation. Emma spotted Jake immediately, leaning against the counter, a drink in hand, eyes scanning the crowd. When he saw her, a slow, knowing smile spread across his lips. "You actually came," he murmured, tilting his glass toward her. Emma slid onto the stool beside him, ignoring the way her pulse quickened. "Don't sound so surprised." Jake smirked. "Didn't think you had it in you." Emma arched a brow. "Had what in me?" He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. The urge to do something reckless. Her breath caught, but she refused to look away. Maybe she had been fooling herself. Maybe this wasn't just a friendly drink. Maybe she had already made her choice the moment she replied to his message. The bartender set a cocktail in front of her, and Emma took a slow sip. The ice clinked against the glass, a sharp contrast to the heat pooling in her stomach as Jake watched her, waiting. And for the first time in a long, long while, Emma didn't feel like resisting. The ice in Emma's drink had nearly melted, condensation dripping onto the napkin beneath her glass. The conversation between her and Jake had started light. Old memories, mutual acquaintances, but as the evening stretched on, something undeniable simmered beneath their words. Jake leaned forward, resting his forearms on the bar. His eyes never wavered from hers. "So, tell me something." Emma smirked, lifting her glass. "That depends on whether or not you're asking something dangerous." Jake chuckled, his smile slow and deliberate. "All right, easy one then. What's something you want but won't admit? The question sent a ripple through her. She hesitated, swirling the liquid in her glass, watching the amber color catch the light. Honesty was dangerous. That's unfair, she murmured. Why? Because I don't think you actually want the answer. Jake's gaze darkened, and he exhaled through his nose, amused. You might be right. The silence that stretched between them was thick with tension, the kind that made the air feel charged. Emma knew she should leave. She should have left 20 minutes ago. But instead, she let the moment linger, let herself soak in the attention, the way Jake looked at her like she wasn't invisible. Come on, Jake said, pushing his stool back. Let's get out of here. Emma arched a brow. And go where? Relax. I'm not dragging you to a hotel, he teased, though his voice held something more serious underneath. Let's take a drive. No expectations. Just some fresh air. Emma hesitated. Every part of her knew she was at a precipice, that whatever decision she made next would mean something. But then she thought about home. Mark's distracted silence, the empty bed, the growing loneliness. What was the harm in a drive? She grabbed her purse. Lead the way. A road with no return. The cool night air brushed against Emma's skin as she stepped outside. Jake's car was sleek, dark, and effortlessly clean. He opened the passenger door for her without a word. As she slid in, she could feel it, the shift. This wasn't just harmless fun anymore. Jake got in, started the engine, and pulled onto the quiet street. The city lights blurred past them, their glow painting the inside of the car in soft gold. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the radio and the occasional turn signal clicking. It was comfortable, intimate even. Then Jake broke the silence. You don't have to answer this, he said, gripping the wheel. But are you happy? Emma felt her throat tighten. It was a simple question, a devastating one. She could have lied. She could have given him a practice smile and said, Of course, I am. But the words never came. Instead, she turned her head toward the window, watching the streetlights flicker past. I don't know, she admitted. Jake didn't press, but she felt him watching her, reading between the lines. The car slowed at a red light. The streets were empty, the world eerily quiet. Jake turned toward her, his voice softer now. Emma. She knew what was coming. A moment she could either lean into or walk away from. Her fingers curled around the hem of her dress, heart hammering. Jake, we shouldn't. He didn't move closer. Didn't push. But his voice dropped lower, rougher. Tell me you don't want this. Emma opened her mouth. No words came.
Because it would have been a lie.
She didn't stop him when he reached out, his fingers brushing against hers, the lightest touch, but it sent something electric racing up her spine. The light turned green. Jake didn't move right away. Say the word, he murmured, and I'll take you home. Emma's breath was shallow. She should say it. Tell him to turn the car around, pretend this night never happened. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, drive. And just like that, the last piece of resistance shattered. As the city lights faded behind them, Emma knew this wasn't a line they could walk back from.